You know, in this business of speculation, most men lose not because the market is too hard to read, but because they make it too hard to read. They clutter their charts with lines and colors, listen to every voice in the crowd, and wonder why their account keeps leaking money. Today, I want to talk about something most traders will never believe until they've paid for the lesson themselves. A simple setup beats 95% of traders. And before we go any further, if you remember the previous video on the 2 confirmations every real breakout needs, you'll see exactly how this ties together. Because simplicity isn't just about fewer indicators, it's about fewer doubts. Now let me tell you something, friend. Simplicity in trading is not ignorance. It's precision. When you've watched enough markets move, you start seeing that the cleanest charts, the quietest setups, and the most obvious levels tend to pay the best. The amateurs hunt for complexity because they think sophistication equals profit. But the professionals, those who survive year after year, use the simplest methods in the world, and they execute them with iron discipline. Ask yourself this. When you see a price building pressure under resistance, do you really need 5 oscillators to tell you what's coming? Or do you already know in your gut that the path of least resistance is up? I learned this long ago, the hard way. When I started, I wanted to be clever. I wanted to outthink the market. And you know what the market did? It punished me for it every time. The market doesn't reward cleverness. It rewards patience and clarity. A simple setup. 1 clean pattern, 1 line in the sand, 1 trigger and 1 stop. That's all a trader needs to build a fortune if he can follow it with consistency. But most men can't. They'd rather chase 10 trades a day than wait for one that's clean. Tell me honestly, do you wait for your setup to come to you? Or do you force the market to give you something that isn't there? The funny thing is, simplicity feels wrong to the human mind. We're wired to believe that more information equals more control. But in trading, more information usually means more confusion. The chart speaks clearly if you let it. It tells you when demand overpowers supply, when momentum is building, and when exhaustion is setting in. You don't need to decorate it. You just need to listen. And listening takes discipline. That's the real secret. Discipline, not data. Most traders I've met can't hold still long enough to hear what the market's saying. They're jumping from setup to setup, trying to reinvent themselves every week. And every time they add something new, they subtract something vital. Their focus. That's why the man with a simple plan will always beat the man with 100 tools. Because while the crowd is thinking, hesitating, double, checking, the simple trader is already in position. Now tell me, how often have you hesitated on a trade that later moved exactly the way you first thought it would? See, I don't believe in complicated systems. I believe in understanding the rhythm of price. A market moves in waves, expansion, contraction, accumulation, distribution. It's not random. It's human behavior written in price bars. And when you learn to read that behavior without all the noise, you start to see opportunity where others see uncertainty. That's the edge simplicity gives you. It clears your sight. You're no longer trying to predict. You're reacting to what is. And remember what I said in that earlier video about confirmations. Those 2 confirmations every real breakout needs. Well, that same principle applies here. You don't need 10 confirmations to act. You need the right 2. 1 from the price itself and 1 from your conviction. That's it. The rest is hesitation disguised as analysis. Now, simplicity doesn't mean laziness. It means you've done your thinking before the market opens. Your plan is already written. Your levels are already marked. When price approaches your zone, you don't think, you execute. That's what separates the student of the market from the gambler. Most people are just placing bets. The trader with a simple setup is executing a plan. You see the difference, don't you? Trading, to me, is a business of observation and execution, not excitement. The more you crave excitement, the faster you'll lose your capital. The more you crave clarity, the faster you'll grow it. It's the same with wealth building. A man who compounds steadily with a clear edge will always outgrow the man who swings wildly for home runs. Your trading capital is your soldier. Don't send it into battle unless you have a clean plan of attack. Would you march an army into the field without a map? Then why do so many traders enter a position without a clear setup? A simple setup has rules you can live by. You know your entry, your stop, your profit target. There's no emotion in it. The market either fulfills your plan or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you step aside, no harm done. But when it does, when everything aligns, you ride the move with confidence, because it's the same pattern you've seen play out 100 times before. That repetition builds trust. And trust in your setup is what gives you longevity in this game. Most people never stay long enough to learn that. They keep changing systems after every loss, chasing the next magic formula. But the truth is, the magic is already inside the simple things. A clean breakout, a pullback to structure, a strong volume confirmation. That's all it takes. The rest is you. Your patience, your risk control, your willingness to let profits run without getting nervous. You can't automate that. You can only build it through experience. You see, every time I simplified my trading, my results improved. Every time I tried to outsmart the market, it humbled me. So I stopped trying to be clever and started trying to be consistent. And consistency is built on repetition, not reinvention. Most traders fail not because they don't know enough, but because they refuse to master what they already know. Think about that for a second. Are you still collecting setups, or are you perfecting one? The market doesn't care about how many strategies you've studied. It only responds to your execution, and your execution improves when your rules are few, clear, and tested. That's the foundation of every great trader's success. A simple plan is easier to trust under pressure. That's not just a saying. It's a truth every real trader learns after they've been knocked down by the market a few times. When the candles start moving fast, when the price snaps against you, when your heart rate jumps and your palms go damp, you don't have time for complicated thinking. You don't have time to check 5 indicators, 3 news feeds, and a dozen alerts. You only have time to act. And in that moment, the strength of your plan decides your fate. If your setup is simple, if you know your entry, your stop, and your target, then you can trust it. If it's complicated, you'll hesitate. You'll question yourself. And hesitation is what kills traders, not the market. You see, when I talk about pressure in trading, I don't mean a bad day at the office. I mean watching your hard-earned money fluctuate in real time. Every tick up or down tugs at your emotions. It tests whether you really believe in your own system. And that's where simplicity shows its power. Because when a plan is simple, it's easy to remember why you took the trade in the first place. The logic stays clear in your mind, but when your strategy is tangled in signals and filters, it becomes fragile. Under stress, you can't recall all the reasons you entered. You start to second guess. You tweak stops, shift targets, cancel plans. That's how traders lose not just money but confidence. Tell me, have you ever watched a good trade turn bad simply because you couldn't decide whether to stay in or bail out? A trader who uses a simple plan has already done the heavy lifting before the trade even begins. He knows exactly what conditions trigger his entry and what conditions invalidate it. There's no gray area, no confusion. It's either there or it isn't. That clarity becomes a shield against emotion. And when emotion is out of the way, execution becomes natural. Trading at its core is not about predicting the future. It's about managing behavior, yours and the crowd's. A simple plan gives you that management tool. It gives you a script to follow when everything feels chaotic. Think of it like a pilot flying through turbulence. He doesn't invent a new procedure mid-air. He follows the checklist he practiced 1,000 times. Trading is no different. The checklist is your setup. Your rules are your instruments. If you stick to them, you don't panic when the market shakes. You stay focused. That's what trust feels like in trading. Not comfort, but calm clarity amid uncertainty. And it only comes from a plan that's simple enough to remember and repeat under pressure. I've seen traders lose everything not because they lacked skill, but because their plans fell apart the moment the market turned volatile. They had too many conditions, too many exceptions. They didn't know which signal to trust, when things moved fast. Simplicity removes that confusion. It narrows your decisions down to one question: is the setup valid or not? That's it. You either act or you don't. No hesitation, no overthinking. The fewer decisions you must make in real time, the more consistent your behavior becomes. And consistency is what builds a trading account over time. Now, remember what we discussed in that earlier video about the two confirmations every real breakout needs. The same logic applies here. You don't need endless layers of validation. You need just enough to build conviction. When your plan is built around clear price behavior and one or two confirmations, you don't flinch under pressure. You know exactly what you're seeing. You know the moment the trade is right or wrong. And that conviction, that confidence to hold your ground, comes from simplicity. Under pressure, the mind looks for something to anchor to. If your trading system is a maze of signals, your mind can't anchor. It drowns in analysis. But when your plan is simple, your anchor is obvious. You trust the setup because you've seen it work. You've tested it. You've lived through it. And it's proven itself. That's what allows a trader to sit still while everyone else panics. Trust isn't born from hope. It's born from repetition and clarity. And clarity lives in simplicity. When I used to trade too many methods, I found myself in a constant state of doubt. Every losing trade felt like a sign I needed a new system. But when I stripped everything down to one clean approach, just price, volume, and structure, things changed. I no longer had to debate whether the signal was real. It was either there or it wasn't. That made it easy to execute, even on bad days, and that's the beauty of a simple plan. It makes you reliable. Not perfect, but consistent enough to stay in the game long enough to learn. Pressure in the market will always test your discipline. News events, fake-outs, sudden reversals, they all try to pull you off balance. But when your process is simple, pressure loses its power. You don't waste time trying to interpret chaos. You follow your blueprint, take the trade, manage risk, and move on. That's professionalism. That's how trading becomes business instead of gambling. Because in business, you don't react emotionally, you follow structure. The truth is, no trader can remove pressure from this game. It's part of it. But you can remove unnecessary complexity. The fewer moving parts in your plan, the fewer things that can break under stress. You don't need to impress the market with how smart you are. You need to execute cleanly every time, with confidence born from simplicity. Because when your plan is simple, your mind is free to focus on the one thing that matters most: execution. You don't win in trading because you always guess right. You win because you handle yourself right when the market doesn't go your way, and the trader with a simple plan always handles himself better. He trusts his edge, not his emotions. He acts the same whether he's up or down. That's how a small, repeatable setup becomes a powerful wealth-building machine over time. And that's why simplicity isn't weakness. It's the strongest foundation you can have when the market starts to shake and every other trader begins to doubt. Confidence grows from repetition, not reinvention. Every trader wants confidence. Every single one. They want to sit in front of the screen and feel certain, decisive, in control. But the truth is, that kind of confidence doesn't come from adding new tools or chasing new strategies. It comes from doing the same thing, the same way, over and over again, until it becomes second nature. It comes from repetition. Repetition is how you build trust, in your setup, in your judgment, and in your ability to stay calm when the market starts moving against you. Reinvention, on the other hand, destroys that trust. Every time you change your method, you reset your learning. You start again from zero. And in trading, there's no progress in constant restarting. The market rewards the man who sticks to his edge long enough to truly understand it. Think about that for a second. How can you expect to develop conviction in something you've never given time to mature? You can't. Most traders fail not because their strategy doesn't work, but because they never stick with it long enough to see its real potential. They get 2 losing trades and they throw it away. They start tinkering, adjusting, adding filters, removing setups. They think they're improving, but what they're really doing is erasing the consistency that breeds confidence. Have you ever noticed how, when you finally find a setup that works, your mind immediately starts looking for ways to make it better? That's ego talking, not experience. You see, confidence in trading is built the same way a craftsman builds skill, with repetition. A blacksmith doesn't learn by forging a different tool every day. He learns by hammering the same piece of iron until he understands the rhythm of heat and steel. A trader's craft is no different. The more you repeat one setup, one condition, one process, the more instinctive it becomes. You start recognizing patterns faster. You start feeling when something's off before it even shows on the chart. That's not luck or intuition. It's the result of deep, deliberate repetition. It's knowledge so ingrained it no longer feels like thinking. But most traders are too impatient to reach that level. They confuse boredom with inefficiency. They want excitement, variety, stimulation. They want every day to feel like a new adventure. That's why the average trader jumps from one system to another. One week it's breakout trading, the next it's scalping, then it's swing trading. They're constantly reinventing themselves instead of refining themselves, and every reinvention resets their progress. They're stuck in a loop of false starts. They think they're evolving, but they're only spinning in circles. Confidence can't survive in that kind of chaos. Tell me, how can you trust yourself when you don't even trade the same way twice? A professional trader doesn't crave new setups. He craves deeper understanding of the ones he already uses. He studies them until he knows how they behave in different markets, different time frames, different levels of volatility. He knows how often they fail and why. That's real mastery. And mastery doesn't come from exploring every corner of trading theory. It comes from exploring one corner until you know every inch of it. Repetition gives you data. It gives you context. It gives you experience you can rely on when the market surprises you. Reinvention gives you uncertainty. It keeps you guessing, always questioning if your latest idea is the right one. Now, remember how in that earlier video I talked about the two confirmations every real breakout needs? That principle ties directly into this one. Once you've identified what those confirmations are for your setup, you don't change them every week. You watch them play out over and over until you can see them forming without even thinking. That's repetition. That's how conviction builds naturally. It's not about discovering new confirmations. It's about learning to trust the ones you already have. Repetition also sharpens your emotional control. When you've seen a setup 100 times, you stop reacting to every tick of price movement. You've been through the pullbacks, the fake-outs, the retests. You know what's normal and what's not. That knowledge quiets your mind. You stop panicking. You stop second-guessing. Confidence isn't arrogance. It's calmness built on familiarity. And familiarity only comes from doing the same thing again and again until your nervous system stops treating it like a threat. Most traders want confidence but refuse to do the boring work that creates it. They want to skip the repetition stage and jump straight to mastery. But the market doesn't work like that. It punishes impatience. Every successful trader you've ever heard of, every single one, has built their success on repetition. They study their setups until they can trade them almost automatically. Their rules aren't complicated, but they're ingrained. That's why they don't freeze when things move fast. They've rehearsed every scenario. They've lived it before. The more you repeat a setup, the more feedback you collect. You start seeing subtle patterns, how it behaves during news hours, how it reacts around round numbers, how volume shifts before a breakout. Those little nuances can't be learned from a book. You can only see them through experience, and that experience builds quiet, unshakable confidence. The kind that doesn't crumble after a few losses. Because when you've seen the same setup win and lose over hundreds of trades, you understand probabilities. You don't take a loss personally. You know it's part of the curve. Reinvention, on the other hand, keeps you fragile. Every time you switch systems, you abandon your accumulated knowledge. You start again as a beginner, with no data, no track record, no trust. You may get a few lucky wins, but when pressure comes, you'll fall back into doubt. You'll second, guess yourself, because you haven't built enough repetition to believe in what you're doing. That's why most traders keep running in circles. They chase new methods to escape the discomfort of not yet mastering the old ones. But mastery only comes through enduring the discomfort and pushing through it. You don't become confident by finding a perfect system. You become confident by knowing exactly how your imperfect system behaves. You know its strengths, its weaknesses, its rhythm. You can only learn that through repetition. Every time you repeat, you're not just building skill, you're building belief. And belief is the backbone of confidence. Without it, you'll crumble under market pressure. With it, you'll execute your plan without hesitation, because you've seen the outcome enough times to trust the process. Confidence built through repetition is steady, not emotional. It doesn't depend on your last trade being a win. It depends on the hundreds that came before it. That's why the great traders always say, it's not the market you need to master, it's yourself. And the way you master yourself is by repeating your edge until it becomes part of you. Only then can you trade with real composure, because you no longer need to hope your setup works. You know it does, because you've proven it to yourself, one trade at a time, through endless, disciplined repetition. Simplicity in trading breeds consistency, not limitation. Most traders hear the word simple and think it means basic or unsophisticated. They believe complexity equals intelligence, that the more tools, indicators, and patterns they can cram onto their chart, the better they'll perform. But the truth is the opposite. Simplicity is not the absence of depth. It's the result of mastery. It's what remains after you've stripped away everything that doesn't matter. The trader who keeps things simple isn't lacking sophistication. He's refined it. He's found what works, and he's chosen to repeat it without distraction. And that repetition is what creates consistency. You can't build stable results on a foundation of constant change. Every successful trader I've ever known eventually comes to the same realization: the simpler the method, the steadier the performance. It's not because the market rewards simplicity directly. It's because simplicity removes confusion. It narrows your focus to the few variables that truly move price. And when your focus is narrow, your actions become consistent. You stop chasing every flicker of movement, every new signal. You start acting on clarity, not emotion. Tell me, how many times have you added another indicator just to feel more confident in a trade? And how often did that extra layer of confirmation actually make things clearer? Complexity is seductive because it gives the illusion of control. You feel smarter when you have more data. You feel safer when you can explain every candle with some technical reasoning. But the market doesn't care about your explanations. It only responds to order flow, psychology, and price behavior. Adding more analysis doesn't make you more accurate. It only gives you more opportunities to hesitate. Simplicity, on the other hand, forces you to rely on structure and discipline. It strips you of excuses. You can't hide behind a complicated system. Your rules are visible, your decisions transparent, and your results measurable. Simplicity breeds consistency because it allows repetition. You can only repeat what you clearly understand. If your setup is simple, you can execute it the same way every time. That means your results, win or lose, are meaningful. You can analyze them, improve them, refine them. But if your process changes trade to trade, your results are random. You can't build on randomness. Trading is a game of probabilities, and probabilities only work when applied consistently. Think of it this way. If a casino changed its rules every night, it would go bankrupt within a week. The house wins because its edge is consistent. The trader must think the same way. When I was younger in the market, I thought the answer to every losing streak was a new system. I'd abandon one method and replace it with something that looked smarter. For a few days it would work, just enough to make me believe I'd finally found the secret. Then the losses would return, and I'd start over again. It took years for me to realize the problem wasn't the system, it was my lack of consistency. I didn't give any one approach enough time to prove its edge. Once I simplified and committed to one clean setup, things changed. I stopped trying to trade everything and started trading only what I understood completely. My results stabilized because my behavior stabilized. A simple trading plan also breeds emotional consistency. When you know exactly what you're looking for, there's less room for doubt. You don't need to check 10 different indicators to justify a decision. You see your setup, you recognize it, and you act. The more you repeat that process, the calmer you become. Confidence grows not from complexity, but from clarity. And clarity only exists in simplicity. Ask yourself, do you trade better when your screen is clean and your plan is clear, or when you're buried in analysis? Remember that earlier video we talked about, the one on the 2 confirmations every real breakout needs. The same principle applies here. When your trading is simple, you know exactly which confirmations matter and which don't. You're not chasing every possible signal. You've defined what enough looks like, and that definition keeps you consistent. Complexity tries to remove uncertainty, but it usually multiplies it. Simplicity accepts uncertainty and focuses on controlling what can be controlled. Your entries, your stops, and your reactions. Simplicity also forces honesty. You can't blame the market when your rules are simple. Either your setup was there, or it wasn't. Either you followed your plan, or you didn't. There's no gray area, no justification, no storytelling. That honesty is painful at first, but it's also liberating. It's what allows growth. When you see exactly where you went wrong, you can fix it. When you hide behind complexity, every loss becomes a mystery. You never know if it was bad luck or bad execution. And if you can't diagnose your mistakes, you'll repeat them. A simple system doesn't mean it's easy to follow. It just means it's clear. Clarity exposes discipline, or the lack of it. Many traders avoid simplicity because it leaves them with nowhere to hide. When you're using a dozen indicators, you can always pretend you made the right call. But when you're using one clean method, the responsibility is yours. That's why simplicity is powerful. It doesn't just create consistency in your results, it creates consistency in your behavior. And here's something else: the simpler your process, the easier it is to adapt when markets change. Complexity locks you in. When you rely on a web of interdependent tools, one shift in volatility or volume can break the whole system. But if your approach is grounded in raw market structure, price, trend, and momentum, you can readjust naturally. Simplicity gives you flexibility. It makes you resilient because you're not bound by rigid formulas. You're reading the same patterns that have existed for 100 years. Markets evolve, but human behavior doesn't. Consistency, in the end, isn't built by perfection. It's built by repetition of simple, high-quality decisions. Every time you make a clean, disciplined trade according to a simple plan, you reinforce trust in yourself. That trust compounds just like capital. The more consistent you become, the more confidence you develop, and the less the market can shake you. Simplicity keeps you grounded. It reminds you that trading isn't about being right all the time. It's about executing well over time. And that steady execution can only come from a process simple enough to follow, even when your emotions are pulling you in every direction. Complexity creates confusion. Clarity creates conviction. Most traders don't lose because they lack intelligence. They lose because they can't see clearly. Their charts are crowded, their thoughts are tangled, and their emotions are louder than their logic. The market itself isn't as confusing as people make it. Price only ever does 3 things: it goes up, it goes down, or it consolidates. That's it. Everything else is interpretation layered on top. But most traders spend their time adding filters, indicators, opinions, and forecasts until they can't even remember what they were looking for in the first place. Complexity doesn't make you more accurate. It only makes you slower and more uncertain. Clarity, on the other hand, cuts through that noise. It gives you conviction, the ability to act decisively when everyone else is hesitating. When you're clear, you know what your setup looks like, what it doesn't look like, and when to step aside. You know where your stop belongs and where your risk lies. You know what's required before you enter and what invalidates the trade once you're in. That kind of structure doesn't come from complexity. It comes from stripping things down until only the essentials remain. Ask yourself this when you've hesitated on a trade. Was it because you didn't see enough information? Or because you had too much? Traders often confuse analysis with control. They think the more data they gather, the safer they'll be. But the truth is, the more information you try to juggle, the less confident you become. Each new input adds another layer of doubt. One indicator says buy, another says sell, a news headline contradicts both, and suddenly you're frozen. You can't pull the trigger because nothing feels certain. That's what complexity does. It paralyzes, and paralysis in trading is costly. The market doesn't wait for your clarity. It moves with or without you. Clarity, though, gives you direction even when the market feels uncertain. It doesn't mean you always know what's coming next. It means you know what you'll do when it does. You're not trying to predict. You're prepared to react. When you have conviction, hesitation disappears. You take the trade, not because you're sure it will win, but because it meets your criteria and you trust your process. That's real confidence. The kind that grows from clarity, not complexity. When I was starting out, I believed the opposite. I used to think the more signals I had, the better my trades would be.